By the closing years of the 1980s, America's transit scene looked steady on the surface, but was beginning to shift underneath. Gillig's Phantom, introduced in 1980, had proven itself as a solid high-floor design. Agencies large and small depended on it for reliable service, and it seemed the Phantom would carry the company well into the next decade. Yet across the Atlantic, bus builders in Europe were already experimenting with low-floor layouts, showing riders what it meant to step aboard without climbing a set of stairs. That vision was starting to reach North American planners, who wondered how long the old high-floor formula could last. At the same time, new regulations were reshaping the industry. In 1987, Congress passed the Surface Transportation and Uniform Relocation Assistance Act. One provision created the Altoona bus test, which from October 1989 required every new transit bus to undergo a rigorous evaluation before it could qualify for federal funding. Gillig sent a Spirit demonstrator through this process, proof that even their smaller models would need to meet the same standard. Another force loomed even larger, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. With its emphasis on accessibility, it pushed agencies to think beyond lifts and toward designs that would one day make low-floor buses the norm. In the middle of this swirl of policy and technology, Gillig introduced the Spirit. But why would the company release a stripped-down high floor just as the industry prepared to embrace the low-floor revolution? When Gillig set out to build the Spirit, the goal was never to replace the Phantom. Instead, it was to create a smaller, simpler coach that could be sold at a lower price point. The dimensions told the story. The Spirit stretched just 27.5 to 28 feet in length, with a width of 96 inches and a wheelbase of 139 inches. Compared to the Phantom, offered in 30, 35, and 40-foot lengths, and eventually at 102 inches wide, the Spirit looked almost compact. It was a high-floor bus, with the familiar climb up a set of steps, but Gillig used plug-style doors at the front and center, giving it a slightly more modern look. The profile was boxy, with straight lines from bumper to bumper, and none of the sculpted touches that gave the Phantom its more refined appearance. The design was pared down deliberately, the frame and bodywork simplified to cut costs and streamline production. From the street, the Spirit stood out for its squared face and blunt rear end. Where the Phantom's proportions felt balanced and somewhat stately, the Spirit could come across as utilitarian, more of a tool than a polished product. That industrial look was part of its identity. It was never meant to be glamorous, only practical. For smaller agencies, that compact form made sense. But for riders accustomed to full-size coaches, the Spirit sometimes looked and felt like a compromise. Under the skin, the Gillig Spirit was just as straightforward as its exterior suggested. Most units came equipped with the Caterpillar 3208T, a compact turbocharged V8 diesel that had already proven itself in medium-duty trucks and smaller transit applications. Toward the end of production, Gillig also offered the Cummins B5.9, an inline six that was equally modest in output, but valued for its durability and simplicity. Both engines were paired with Allison's MT-643 automatic transmission. This four-speed gearbox was a workhorse of the era, basic, rugged, and easy to service. Mechanics appreciated it for being familiar and forgiving, and parts were readily available. For small agencies with tight budgets, this package meant predictable maintenance costs and fewer surprises in the shop. Still, compared with the Phantom, the Spirit's choices looked modest. The Phantom could be ordered with the Detroit Diesel 6V92TA, a larger and more powerful engine that gave it real highway muscle. The Spirit, by contrast, felt pared back. Its driveline was chosen not to impress, but to meet a price point. From behind the wheel, that difference was clear. Drivers often noted that the smaller engines made for quieter operation around town, with less vibration than the big two-strokes. But when routes included steep grades or faster suburban stretches, the Spirit could feel underpowered, struggling to keep pace. It was fine for neighborhood shuttles or local circulators, but it was never the bus you wanted for long pulls or heavy loads. Where the Gillig Spirit was actually built has sparked more than a little debate among enthusiasts. Some sources, including later summaries like Wikipedia, list Gillig's longtime home base in Hayward, California, but deeper records, VIN decoders, and notes from the CPTDB archives point instead to Gillig's short-lived facility in Hillsboro, Texas. That plant was opened in the 1980s to expand capacity, yet it never matched the output or the reputation of Hayward. By the time Spirit production ended, the Hillsboro shop was also on its way out. What we do know with confidence is the scale. Between 1989 and 1991, only about 200 to 250 Spirits rolled off the line. For comparison, the Phantom was selling in the thousands during the same period. The Spirit was clearly not intended as a core product. It was more of an experiment, a side offering aimed at a very narrow slice of the market. The limited run came down to demand. Few agencies were clamoring for a short, stripped-down high-floor bus, just as accessibility laws and design trends were pushing in the opposite direction. Without strong orders, Gillig had little reason to keep the Spirit alive. In hindsight, its small production figures make sense. The Spirit was never meant to be a flagship. It was a footnote, a series produced briefly to test the waters, then quietly retired. Even with its limited production, the Gillig Spirit did find homes in a handful of transit fleets across the country. In California alone, agencies such as Torrance Transit, Foothill Transit, Union City Transit, and Monterey Salinas Transit put the compact buses to work. Beyond the West Coast, the Mid-Valley Regional Transit Authority in Ohio and the Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority in Florida also operated small batches. These agencies typically used the Spirit for community shuttle service, short circulator routes, and downtown connectors, where a full-size Phantom would have been too much bus for the job. On tight city streets, the Spirit's 28-foot frame and narrow 96-inch width made it easier to maneuver, and riders often noticed how quickly it could dart around corners compared with the larger coaches. Still, the Spirit never became a common sight. For every fleet that tried it, only a few units were purchased, and they often served side routes rather than main lines. As the 1990s wore on and low-floor designs gained traction, the Spirit faded quickly from daily service. Some buses did find second lives. A number were sold at auction and repurposed, converted into school transports for private institutions, or reimagined as party buses and motorhomes. In those roles, the Spirit's small size became an advantage rather than a liability. For passengers who did ride one in its prime, the memory was simple: a bus that was small, quick to turn, and a little different, but never destined to become a household name. Looking back, the reasons for the Spirit's short life are easy to see. First was its size. At just 96 inches wide, the Spirit was out of step with the broader industry, which by the late 1980s was moving rapidly toward 102-inch buses. That extra half-foot made a difference in passenger capacity and comfort, and most agencies didn't want to invest in equipment that already felt outdated. Second, the Spirit remained a high-floor coach. By the time it debuted, the Americans with Disabilities Act was on the horizon, and accessibility was becoming more than just a talking point. It was a legal requirement. Agencies knew that ramps and low entries would soon be the standard, and buying a new high-floor bus in 1989 looked like a poor long-term bet. The Spirit also suffered from limited choices. Buyers couldn't pick from multiple lengths, layouts, or engine options the way they could with the Phantom. That lack of flexibility narrowed its appeal to only the smallest operators. And when larger agencies had money to spend, they chose the proven Phantom instead, which offered stronger engines, longer bodies, and a track record of durability. Finally, in the so-called budget market, the Spirit faced plenty of competition. Other builders were already offering compact coaches that met similar needs, often with better support or more modern designs. The result was inevitable. After just 3 years and a couple hundred units, the Spirit slipped quietly out of Gillig's catalog, leaving behind little more than a curious footnote. In the grand story of American transit, the Gillig Spirit barely makes a ripple. It was not a commercial success, nor did it set the standard for what came next. Yet its brief appearance between 1989 and 1991 still matters. The Spirit marked a small but telling step in Gillig's journey, from the proven phantom high floor of the 1980s to the breakthrough low floor that arrived in 1996 and went on to dominate the U.S. market. Seen in hindsight, the Spirit was part experiment, part stopgap. It revealed how Gillig was testing different formulas, searching for the right mix of size, cost, and accessibility at a moment when the entire industry was in flux. While the Phantom carried the company's reputation and the low floor eventually secured its future, the Spirit sat quietly in between, bridging two eras even as it struggled to find buyers. For those who did ride one, the memories remain unique. The Spirit may have been short-lived, but its small frame and quick maneuvering made it stand out from the crowd. It was a bus you noticed precisely because there weren't many of them. If you ever spotted a Gillig Spirit in your town or even rode one, share your memories in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so together we can keep alive the stories of vehicles that once rolled through America's streets and now live only in memory.